Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. What would you do if an HOA you never joined started fining you $25 a day for security lights on your own house? I thought it was a mistake until they threatened a lien. So I went to their board meeting with one question that stopped the room cold. So this happened about 6 months ago, and I'm still amazed at how completely these people messed up. I work as a data analyst, which basically means I spend my days looking at numbers, finding patterns, and keeping detailed records of everything. That attention to detail turned out to be exactly what I needed when dealing with these entitled jerks. First, let me set the scene. About 2 years ago, I bought this house in what I thought was the perfect spot. It's part of a small cluster of 5 homes that were built back in the 1970s. Nice quiet street, decent neighbors. Nothing fancy, but exactly what I wanted. The thing is, about 10 years after these houses were built, some big development company came in and built this massive planned community all around us. They called it something like the Estates at Eagle Ridge, which sounds way fancier than it actually is. When I was house hunting, my realtor made it crystal clear that these older homes were never part of the new HOA. That was actually a selling point for me because I had heard horror stories about HOAs and their crazy rules. I specifically asked about it during the buying process, and my title search came back completely clean. No HOA covenants, no restrictions, nothing. I even saved all those documents in my filing cabinet because, well, that's just how my brain works. The house sits right on the edge where the old neighborhood meets the new development. My back fence literally touches their territory, but we're definitely separate. I liked it that way. I could enjoy the maintained common areas nearby without having to deal with someone telling me what color I could paint my front door. Everything was peaceful for the first year and a half. Then this past winter, we started having problems with package theft and car break-ins around the area. It was all over the local news and people were posting about it on social media constantly. Someone even shared ring camera footage of these guys just casually strolling through driveways, checking car doors like they were window shopping. I'm not a paranoid person, but I'm also not stupid. I decided to install some security lighting around my property. After doing some research, I bought 3 really good motion-activated LED floodlights. Nothing crazy or obnoxious, just standard security fixtures that you'd see at any home improvement store. I had them professionally installed so they'd be aimed properly. One over the front porch, one covering the driveway, and one for the side yard where I park my car. The lights were perfect. They only came on when there was motion. They were bright enough to actually see what was happening, but they weren't blinding or pointed at anyone else's property. Well, except for maybe a tiny bit of spill when someone pulled into my driveway, which might have been visible from the street. But that lasted maybe 30 seconds max, and it was my own driveway. I thought that was the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. About a week after the installation, I came home from work to find this crisp white envelope in my mailbox. No return address, but it had that official look that immediately makes you think either jury duty or bad news. I opened it up and found this perfectly formatted letter on fancy paper. The letterhead said, "The Estates at Eagle Ridge HOA, Architectural Review Committee." The letter was polite enough, I guess, but it was also pretty presumptuous. It said that unapproved exterior lighting fixtures had been installed on my property and that this was a violation of some bylaw about aesthetic harmony. It claimed my lights were excessively bright and didn't match the warm, ambient character of the community. The best part was at the bottom where it gave me 14 days to remove the lights and submit a new lighting plan for committee approval. Like I needed their permission to put lights on my own house. I sat there holding this letter, and I couldn't help but smile. This was going to be interesting. I walked straight to my filing cabinet and pulled out my property documents. The closing paperwork, the official plat map, the title insurance policy, everything. I spread it all out on my kitchen table and confirmed what I already knew. My property was definitely not part of their HOA. Never had been, never would be. Instead of just throwing their letter away, I decided to have some fun with this. I'm a detail person, remember, so I was actually curious to see how far they'd take this before they realized their mistake. I composed a very professional email to the address on their letter. I kept it friendly but specific. I wrote something like this. Dear HOA Architectural Review Committee, I received your letter about the lighting at my address. To make sure I'm following all the right rules, could you please send me a copy of the CC&Rs that give the estates at Eagle Ridge HOA authority over my specific property parcel? I checked my title report and deed from when I bought the house, and I seem to have misplaced this document. Thanks for your help. I made sure to include my actual parcel number from the county records. If they were legitimate, they'd have to look it up, and when they did, they'd see the problem immediately. I sent the email and waited. Days went by with no response. I was starting to think maybe they'd figured it out and decided to drop it quietly. Then she showed up at my door. It was a Saturday morning and I was drinking coffee in my pajamas when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find this woman in her 60s standing on my porch with a clipboard and an attitude. She had that look of someone who was used to being in charge and didn't expect to be questioned. "I'm Carol from the Architectural Review Committee," she announced like I should be impressed. "We didn't get a response to our notice, so I'm here to follow up." I told her I had sent an email, and she just waved her hand dismissively. "We're very busy. You just need to take the lights down. They're blinding everyone and they don't match the approved bronze carriage-style fixtures." I stayed calm and polite. "I understand your preference, but they're for security. Like I mentioned in my email, I was hoping you could clarify which document gives the HOA authority over my property." She actually scoffed at me. "We have authority over the entire community. You're in the estates at Eagle Ridge. You have to follow the rules like everyone else." "I think my property might be situated differently," I said. "My deed doesn't mention the HOA." That's when she got really condescending. "All the realtors say that to get around the fees. It doesn't matter. You're here, you benefit from our property values, you follow our rules. Take the lights down or the fines will start." And then she just turned around and walked away before I could say another word. Just marched right back to her golf cart and drove off. I closed the door and leaned against it, shaking my head. This woman was either completely clueless or she knew exactly what she was doing and thought she could bully me into compliance. Either way, she had just made this a lot more interesting. I went back to my computer and created a new folder called HOA Harassment. I scanned Carol's original letter and saved it. Then I opened up a spreadsheet and started logging everything. Dates, communications, alleged violations, everything. If this was going to turn into something bigger, I wanted every detail documented. A week later, the second letter arrived. This one was not polite. The subject line across the top said, "Failure to cure violation," in big red letters. According to this new letter, since I hadn't removed the lights, they were fining me $50. And if I didn't fix the problem immediately, they'd add another $25 every single day until I complied. I added it to my spreadsheet and kept track of their imaginary daily fines. It was like watching a slot machine that only went up. 2 weeks after that, things got serious. This time the letter came via certified mail, which meant I had to sign for it. The return address wasn't from the HOA directly, it was from some property management company that apparently handled their enforcement. The total amount they claimed I owed was now over $400. But the really interesting part was the language in this letter. It talked about placing a lien on my property, foreclosure proceedings, and how all their legal fees would be my responsibility. They were threatening to take my house over some security lights. Most people would probably panic at this point. I felt excited. This was exactly what I'd been waiting for. They had put their threats of illegal action in writing and sent it through the postal service where everything was tracked and documented. They had no idea how badly they had just messed up. I did a little research online and found out that the HOA held public board meetings on the first Tuesday of every month. Their agendas were posted on their website, and when I checked the upcoming meeting, I found exactly what I expected. Right there in black and white, ratification of fines and authorization of legal action for property at my address. They were going to vote to put a lien on my house. Perfect. I spent the next few days getting ready. I printed out every piece of correspondence they'd sent me. I printed my spreadsheet showing all their accumulated fines. I got a high-resolution color copy of the official county plat map with my property clearly outlined in yellow highlighter. I made copies of the relevant pages from my title insurance policy that explicitly guaranteed my property was free of any HOA encumbrances. I put everything in a professional folder and practiced what I was going to say. I've given presentations at work before, but this felt different. This was personal. The meeting was held in their community clubhouse, which was actually pretty nice. It had that typical planned community vibe with beige walls and generic landscape paintings. When I walked in, there were maybe 20 people scattered around folding chairs, most of them looking bored. I signed in at the front table and took a seat in the back row. Nobody paid any attention to me, which was exactly what I wanted. I just sat there quietly, my folder in my lap, waiting for my moment. The meeting started with typical HOA stuff. Budget reviews, landscape maintenance, complaints about people not picking up after their dogs. I half listened while keeping an eye on the agenda. My item was third from the last. When they finally got to it, Carol stood up and walked to the front of the room. She had her clipboard, of course, and she launched into this whole presentation about me. According to her version of events, I was this defiant, uncooperative homeowner who was ruining the neighborhood's carefully maintained aesthetic. She said I'd been refusing to respond to their reasonable requests and ignoring all attempts at communication. She told the board that the bright, harsh lights were blinding drivers and completely out of character for their upscale community. She made it sound like I had installed stadium lighting or something. Then she asked them to approve sending my case to their attorney so they could place a lien on my house and recover all the accumulated fines. The board president, this older guy in a polo shirt, looked like he just wanted to get through the agenda and go home. He glanced around the table at the other board members and was about to call for a vote when I raised my hand. "Excuse me, Mr. President," I said. "My name is OP and I'm the owner of the property in question. May I have 2 minutes to provide some clarifying information before you vote?" You could have heard a pin drop. Carol's head whipped around and she stared at me like I was a ghost. The board president looked surprised but nodded. "Of course. Please come forward." I walked to the front of the room, set my folder on the table, and pulled out the large plat map. I unfolded it so everyone could see, then looked around the room. "Good evening," I said. "For the past 6 weeks, your committee, led by Ms. Carroll here, has been sending me notices, fines, and legal threats." I held up my folder. "I have all the correspondence documented right here. According to your records, the fines now total $475. You're being asked tonight to vote to place a lien on my home." I paused and pointed to the map. "There's just one problem with that. This is the official recorded plat map from the county assessor's office. This blue line here shows the boundary of the estates at Eagle Ridge HOA. As you can all clearly see, my property right here is located outside that line. It has never been part of your association." I pulled out my title insurance policy and held it up. "This is my title insurance policy, which legally guarantees that my property is free and clear of your covenants. You have absolutely no legal jurisdiction over my property. None whatsoever." The room was completely silent. I looked directly at Carol, whose face had gone from smug to pale, then back at the board. "What you've been doing for 6 weeks is harassment. And what you're voting on tonight isn't placing a legitimate lien. You're authorizing your association to commit fraud by filing a false lien against a property you don't govern. I have every communication documented, including the certified letter threatening this illegal action." I closed my folder and straightened up. "I trust you'll all vote no on this agenda item and put an end to this harassment immediately." Then I walked back to my seat and sat down. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Finally, the board president cleared his throat. Could we see that map again?" I brought it back up and spread it out on their table. All 5 board members crowded around it, and I watched their faces change as they realized what they were looking at. One of them actually put his finger on the map and traced the HOA boundary, then found my property outside of it. "Oh my God," someone whispered. The board president looked absolutely horrified. He turned to Carol and his voice was shaking with anger. "Is this accurate? This property isn't in our HOA?" Carol was fumbling through her clipboard, clearly panicking. The management company said..." "Answer the question," he snapped. "Is this property in our HOA or not?" She couldn't even look at him. I thought... It's right there. It's part of the community." "That's not what I asked." He turned back to me and his whole demeanor changed. "Sir, I am so incredibly sorry. This is completely unacceptable. We had no idea." He banged his gavel and declared the agenda item tabled indefinitely. Then he adjourned the entire meeting on the spot. People started filing out, but I could hear them whispering and I caught more than a few dirty looks being thrown in Carol's direction. The board president came over to me as I was packing up my materials. He looked like he wanted to crawl under a rock. "I cannot apologize enough for this," he said. "We're going to fix this immediately. You'll be hearing from our attorney within 48 hours with a formal resolution." I shook his hand and told him I appreciated that. Carol had already disappeared, probably slinking out the back door. 2 days later, I got a letter from the HOA's law firm. It was a beautiful thing, 3 pages of formal legal apologies for what they called an administrative error. It confirmed that all fines had been expunged from their records and that my property was definitively not part of their HOA. It also mentioned that the board would be receiving additional training on jurisdictional boundaries and that policies were being put in place to prevent similar incidents in the future. The letter asked me to consider the matter closed and resolved. I was happy to do that. A week later, I got a text from my neighbor who lived a few houses down in the actual HOA. He'd been at the meeting and told me that Carol had been forcefully retired from the Architectural Review Committee at an emergency board session. Apparently, this wasn't the first time she'd overstepped her authority, but it was definitely the most embarrassing. He also mentioned that word had gotten around the community about what happened, and Carol was pretty much a pariah now. People were avoiding her like the plague because nobody wanted to be associated with the woman who tried to illegally threaten someone's house over security lights. That was 6 months ago. My security lights are still there, still working perfectly, still keeping my property safe. I never did submit that lighting plan Carol wanted, obviously. The best part is that I decided to upgrade my front porch light to one of those smart bulbs that can change colors. Sometimes I set it to green or red during holidays just because I can. It's not obnoxious or anything, just a nice little reminder that I live on my own property where I make my own rules. I learned a few important lessons from this whole experience. First, never assume someone in authority actually knows what they're talking about. Second, documentation is everything. If I hadn't kept detailed records of their harassment, this could have gone very differently. And third, sometimes the best response to a bully is to let them dig their own grave. The security lights have already paid for themselves, not just in peace of mind, but in the satisfaction of watching entitled people learn that their little kingdom has borders they can't cross. Every time those lights come on when I pull into my driveway, I smile a little bit. Carol still lives in the HOA, by the way. I see her occasionally when I'm out walking my dog, but she always finds somewhere else to look. I think she's learned her lesson about assuming she has power over people she doesn't actually govern. The irony is that if she had approached me politely from the beginning and just asked about the lights as a neighbor, I probably would have been happy to discuss it. But she chose to come at me with threats and fines and legal action, all while having absolutely no authority to do any of it. I sometimes wonder if she ever actually looked at a map before she started her campaign against me. Did she just assume that because my house was near their development, it must be part of it? Or did she know the truth and think she could intimidate me into compliance anyway? Either way, it doesn't matter now. The case is closed, the lights are staying, and I have the most well-documented property rights in the entire area. Plus, I have a great story to tell at parties. My wife thinks I should have just ignored their first letter and saved myself the hassle. She's probably right from a practical standpoint, but I'm glad I didn't. Sometimes you have to stand up to people who think they can push others around, especially when they're doing it illegally. The whole thing took about 2 months from start to finish, but it was worth it to see the look on Carol's face when she realized how badly she'd messed up. That moment when the entire room understood what she'd been doing, and she knew that everyone knew, that was priceless. I've thought about what would have happened if I'd been less organized or less willing to fight back. How many people just take down their lights or pay the fines because they don't want the hassle? How many people get bullied by HOAs that don't even have jurisdiction over them? It makes me angry to think about, honestly. These people wield their little bit of power like they're running a small country, and they count on homeowners being too intimidated or too busy to push back. Well, they picked the wrong person this time. The security lights aren't just about preventing break-ins anymore. They're a symbol of standing up for yourself when someone tries to run roughshod over your rights. They're a reminder that you don't have to roll over just because someone sends you an official-looking letter. And every night when those lights automatically come on at sunset, I know that my property is safe, secure, and completely free from the interference of people who think they know better than I do about how to manage my own home. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Recently, my company introduced a new process for supplying customers with expensive consumables. Previously, this process involved a lot of direct communication, numerous emails, and face-to-face meetings with customers to understand their needs. However, while I was on PTO, everything changed. Without any notice or consultation, a completely new system was implemented. My team, which used to handle about 65% of the previous process, had no involvement whatsoever in designing or approving this new method. Now, instead of collaborating directly with customers and colleagues, I've been given a standardized form divided into 4 sections. One for me, one for sales, one for logistics, and one for territory assistants and managers. My section of the form is minimal. All I do is indicate how many boxes to supply. Critical details such as who the customer is, where the order is going, pricing adjustments, and preferential rates, information I used to manage, are no longer included. To make things worse, customer details on the forms are often incorrect. I used to fix those errors in the system, but I no longer have permission to do so. That's now handled by head office. Even though I know my customer base well and try to provide accurate updates, my emails now bounce back. When I raised these issues, I was simply told to follow the form and not deviate. So I did. I completed my section, sent it to the designated address, and moved on. Nothing happened, until months later when a customer called to say they were running critically low on consumables. I escalated the issue to my manager, but by that point I had already submitted 24 forms without any feedback or visible results. Recently, while I've been off recovering from surgery, I received an email asking for the same data I used to provide under the old system. I've chosen not to respond. That information is scattered across old emails and records, and it's no longer my responsibility. Ironically, the new process that was supposed to reduce costs and simplify operations has left 3 department heads confused and unable to proceed. They don't know the customer names, product details, we have 197 different products, or order history, only the number of boxes. The system they rely on can't function without accurate data input, and since I'm now strictly following the form as instructed, that data isn't being entered anymore. In short, the new process has stripped away the practical knowledge and collaboration that once made the system work. It's inefficient, confusing, and ultimately counterproductive. The next one is an entitled people story. A couple days ago, I told my eldest brother Mark, and by proxy also his wife Julie, to stick it where the sun don't shine after Mark went on a text storm about my adopted daughter. For background, my daughter Vivi may not be biologically mine, but she is my daughter. I've known her since her first year of life. I've been her mom since. I married her father when she was too small to even really remember and legally adopted her. She's only always ever called me Mama. When my husband passed away, it became me and her against the world, the dynamic duo. Recently, Vivi didn't start a fight, but finished it with a bully she'd endure for much longer than she should have had to. The whole saga is on my account if you want all those details, but the short is she ended up defending herself from him physically. He's now expelled. My daughter was not punished at home. In fact, I told her good job on defending herself. That's where my butt-crack-brained brother got on his bullcrap. He never liked my late husband unless our daughter and always had something rude to say about them. But this sent him into a huge tirade on how Vivi will grow up to be a criminal, that I'm encouraging violence, and the next time she gets her feelings hurt, she will think it's okay to start a fight. Julie said she is concerned because Singe parent households produce angry and bottled up children who are FSR more likely to end up in jail. I told them I never asked for their opinions and the rest of my siblings agreed with me. But my brother wasn't done. He texted me vile things about my daughter, and his stepson sent video and screenshots of my brother calling her a stray kitten, his apparent favorite insult, and saying that she is not my child and so on. I uninvited him to my 4th of July BBQ, told him he is not to talk to or even look at my child until he fixes his attitude, and he just doubled down. Let me be clear. He is the eldest, but he is adopted too. He is biologically my cousin. 2 of his 4 kids are stepchildren. Julie is a widow. His hypocrisy is breathtaking. So I had my daughter send over all the evidence she had and delete it off her phone, and I took all my screenshots and the like and sent it to my mom. I snitched so hard. I don't have time for this bullcrap. Don't know what she said to him, but she called me back that night a few hours later and told me to let her know if he decides to show his whole ass again. She talked to Vivi on speaker while I finished making us some treats before bed and told her that she loves her very much, that Uncle Mark is being a jerk, and if he or Aunt Julie try to bother Vivi or I again to tell her. It rained like crazy on the 4th, so my BBQ only had a handful of folks who live near me from the family and some friends. Vivi was happy, kicking her other uncles' asses at Mario Kart, and all the adults are drinking and dancing or watching the rain on my porch when who walks in? Mark. Julie. They're 4 kids. Julie strolls right up to me with a whole-ass chicken and asks where she can put it down. I was like, sorry, what? I asked her what she was doing here and why they were there. Apparently, my dear old bro didn't tell her about our most recent spat and the invitation being revoked. She looked truly shocked. I'm livid by this point, but the kids are playing video games and Vivi looks happy. She's pointedly ignoring my brother who said hello to her, and when he doesn't get an answer, he throws his hands up and says, "So much for manners." My other brother, Zeke, just goes UO to him and starts to talk to him quietly. I could hear Mark arguing, but Zeke just kept his hand on his shoulder. I looked at Julie, who looked like she was in panic/fix-it mode. I told her, listen, if they want to leave the kids here for a couple hours, that's fine, but my brother is not welcome in my home, so she will have to be the one to pick them up. She thanked me and went to my brother, who now had both our other brothers talking to him. They all walk him out. I heard him say, "Kids, let's go," and his wife said, kids, I'll be back by 3. Be good," and pulled him out. I sent him a text reminding him not to speak to my child, and he is not welcome in my home until he apologizes for all the verbal abuse towards Vivi and fixes his attitude about her. My stepdad and mom arrived not long after, and when he was told what happened, Dad started to take his pipe to the porch and sat right next to the front door. Mom arranged it with Julie that she will take the kids home when she leaves, and we managed to have a good time. Today is Sunday. My mom had asked we all go this week, so we did. She did warn me Mark might be there. I warned Vivi. She said it was fine. I told Mom it's fine, but Mark needs to give Vivi a wide berth. And I told Mark via text that he is to stay away from my child. He replied, "I don't need reminders." Okay then. Service went fine. I'm not much of a church person, but Vivi had a solo and sang beautifully, so this mama is happy. There was food happening in the event hall, and Vivi asks if she can stay a while and chat with her friends. Sure, I say. Have fun. All was well for about 45 minutes. I was sitting with stepdad and one of my brothers when Mark comes over to say his byes. Everyone gets a hug but me. Fine by me. He says, "Kitty did a good job up there." And I said, "Who?" And I could see that it was in that moment he knew he ducked up. I don't know if he meant to say Kitty or not, and I don't rightly care. I said, "Who?" again, and he muttered Vivica, and I nodded and told him that is her name. Same name she's had the whole time. Julie is trying to get him to leave, and he is almost leaving when Vivi and her friends come up. She told me later she saw her uncle come up to us and not hug me, and that made her mad. So she came up to be near for support with her friends. I did tell her that I'm grown and don't need her to come to my defense, that it's my job to protect her, not the other way around, and her response? Just a nod. Kids. Mark complimented Vivi, and she gave a very plain thanks, then asked if I was ready to go. I said sure if she is. Mark sent me a short text telling me I embarrassed him and our whole family with my show I put on. He's upset now because we don't need to make our issues everyone's business at church and that I don't even go to church, so why invade his safe spaces? He called me immature and that I need to stay away from his kids so I don't teach them such poor manners. I haven't even responded. Vivi is getting dressed and we are going to my mom's for lunch. Stepdad said Mark outright refused to come when he confirmed I would be there. Mark has told our parents if I am somewhere, he won't be there. My reply? Does he promise? I told my dad, if he wants to be this way, we can just go full NC. I don't have patience for this nonsense, and that also meant I am not helping out next time he needs anything. I'm out. Dad got quiet and said he gets it, but to remember that Mark's kids did nothing. He's okay if I want to stick it to Mark, but asks I don't friendly fire on these our children. I told him we'll talk when we get there. He's going to want to bring up our family vacation, of which I took care of the hotel and passes for because my job is within that industry. I'm usually the go-to for these things. We are supposed to go for the first week of August. We try to do one vacation as a big extended family per year. We'll see how this ducking goes. The next one is an entitled parent story. I, 18F, can't stand my father anymore. I've really disliked him all my life. Even when I was in primary school, I remember sitting in class, excited to go home, and then boom, I remember he'll be the one picking me up, and my mood would do a complete 360. He makes my mom do everything for him. Every day before work, I hear, "Where's my uniform? Where did you put my razor? Where did you put my shoes? I can't find my bag, pack me lunch, etc." My mom works from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., and when she comes home, she'll clean up after all his mess, wash/mop the floors, do his washing, everything. I've never even seen him make his own bed. I try my best to help her, but I can't justify cleaning up all his messes every day. Now he has a full-time job and he is a very hard worker. He pays the mortgage for the house and takes the dog for a walk a couple times a week, washes the car. But that's really it. And if he does something like wash the car, he'll make everyone come downstairs and look at how clean it is. And if I don't pretend to be impressed, then I'm being a horrible daughter, apparently. We barely have a relationship. It's not as bad as it used to be, but I can't stomach being in the same room as him for more than 10 minutes. I can't even listen to him eat. I used to think it was all my fault and that I just hated him for no reason, but I realize this is just years of built-up frustration. If I talk back to him, I get shouted at by my mom and him. He'll get said and say, "Oh, my daughter hates me. All my life I just can't stand him." When I was younger, I used to be really underweight. That was just how I was. I was a skinny child, and I was very skinny up until about a year ago. I couldn't help it. All my life, he'd scream at me for not finishing my dinner. I got my period at 9, and he said it was because of all the sugar I ate. I literally ate a normal amount of sweets all my life. I DK, what's wrong with him? When I was a teenager, he'd accuse me of being anorexic when I wasn't. Even nowadays, he'll tell me I'm not allowed to eat chocolate before dinner. I'm a full-grown adult? I used to struggle a lot with my mental health in my early teens, and when he found out I was self-harming, he held my arm up and screamed at me saying I was satanic. And he'd always say I wasn't normal for literally anything I did that he didn't like. What I find funny about this is that all my life whenever me and my mum buy sweets at the shop, we'll have to hide it because he will eat it all, so until this day. I have to sneak downstairs, ask my mum in Irish if I can have some chocolate because he doesn't speak it. It's the same thing with painkillers. I can't take painkillers in front of him because he will go mad and say I take too many blah blah blah. If I didn't finish meals when I was younger, he would genuinely scream at me and call me horrible names, so I used to eat in my room, and if I couldn't finish my dinner, I'd wrap it up in tissue and hide it in a drawer. A bad habit that still follows me now that I'm 18. Because I don't clean up after him and all his crap 24/7, he will take any chance he gets to embarrass me in public. We were visiting his family in Serbia one summer, and he began to tell everyone how I never help my mother out with the cleaning and that I'm lazy and all I do is sleep. During my last year of Irish high school, I would stay home a lot and do so much studying at home instead of going to school. I'd have to leave school early all the time because I'd get these horrible cramps, which we think are endometriosis. I'd cry all the time and would constantly have to go to the doctor because the pain would be unbearable. It's calmed down now, but that era of my life was so excruciatingly painful I couldn't leave my bed for the days, and I was constantly stressed because I had the most important exam of my life coming up. When he'd pick me up early, he'd ask me to take the dog for a walk or do something else. I remember I looked at him one time, my eyes were almost swollen shut from the amount of crying due to the pain I was in, and asked him, "Daddy, why do you think I come home early from school all the time?" And he looked at me and said, "So you can miss class and exams." I remember in that moment my heart just sank and I realized he did not see me or listen to me at all. By that point, I had probably been to the doctor about 12 times in 1 month. I had gotten countless ultrasounds, and that's the reason HR thought I'd been missing school. Reading this back, I probably seem like a spoilt brat, but there's so much crap he's done that I forgot about / haven't put into this because it would take me hours to write. I don't even know why I'm writing this, I just want someone to see this and relate so I know I'm not alone. Also, sorry if my grammar's messed up, I'm upset ATM because I'm home alone with him today and he's just being really horrible, which is what prompted me to write this. Anyway, thank you for watching.